Decarbonizing the Building Industry podcast, where we explore the future of sustainable urban development. The DBI initiative is more than just a network. It's a powerful movement driving the building industry toward a resilient, low-carbon future. By uniting researchers, industry leaders, and policymakers, DBI is paving the way for innovative, energy-efficient buildings that align with global net zero 2050 goals. In each episode, we bring you the voices of those at the forefront of this transformation. Today, we will hear from William Leggate, who will share his journey, aspirations, and the groundbreaking projects he is leading to decarbonize the building industry. Bill, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much, Fanni. It's a great pleasure to be here today. Thank you very much for the invitation.
We are happy to have you here. And may I ask you to introduce yourself and your connection to the DBI network?
Yes, most definitely, Fanni. So I'm a principal research scientist and also the team leader of the Forest Products Innovation Group, which is in Agri-Science Queensland, which is part of the Queensland Department of Primary Industries. Our team, our Forest Product Innovations team, is the largest forest products research group in Australia, with also a very long history, more than 100 years working in timber research in Australia. So we have a team of engineers and scientists and technicians working on wood products research. I've been working in the industry, in the forest industry, for about 30 years, in both Australia, also overseas. I've worked in both the private sector and also with government, and I've worked in scientific, technical, commercial, and management roles.
As an outsider to Australia, I came here 5 years ago. So it's amazing to hear for me that Australia has forests. That's not the usual picture of Australia. Could you please explain how big this kind of industry is in Australia?
The forest industry in Australia has always been very important throughout the development of Australia, its history, from the very early days. And for a very long time, forests have been the main provider of building materials for housing particularly. And even currently, I think something like more than 60% of house frames in Australia are built using timber. So Australia has a very large forest resource, particularly a native forest resource. I think it's something like 140 million hectares of forest. However, not all of that is available for harvesting. Only a very small fraction of that is actually allowed to be harvested. In actual fact, the vast majority of Australia's timber, wood products, come from plantations. So Australia has around 2 million hectares of plantations. In terms of what goes into the building industry, most of that is coming from softwood plantations, so pine plantations. There are also hardwood plantations, but they'll mainly put in for pulp and paper uses. Very significant contribute to Australia's economy and employment.
Thank you very much for the clarification. And again, it's amazing to hear that although the picture of Australia is vast lands with grass, it's more about how big of a land area you are using in the timber industry. You mentioned pine. What other kinds of trees are you working with?
In terms of pine, which is the most important provider or the main timber type that's used in Australia in construction and other uses, it's predominantly radiata pine, so Pinus radiata. But there's also other pine species such as a hybrid between a slash pine and Caribbean pine. And there's also other pines such as maritime pine. Hoop pine in Queensland is also a very important plantation species. And then there's a very large assortment of diverse Australian hardwood timbers. That varies, but key species there are timbers such as spotted gum from Queensland, and you have blackbutt, and you have thick ash and Tasmanian oak, and a whole lot of other species as well from native forest. And then in terms of plantation hardwoods, the main species there are Eucalyptus globalus or southern blue gum, and you have Eucalyptus nitens or shining gum. Then a variety of other sort of plantation hardwood species. But as I mentioned, currently most of that plantation hardwood resource is designated for pulp and paper. However, there is increasing interest in and recognition of the potential to use that plantation hardwood resource for building products and other purposes apart from pulp and paper.
Why are we focusing in the building industry more on the softwood than the hardwood?
In the past, various decades ago, most of our timber did come from native forest, mainly native hardwood, but also some native species like cypress pine. But due to government policies and I suppose community perception and request, there's been a constant locking up of native forest and reduced access to them for timber. And you probably hear constantly there's a lot of discussion in the media. It's a very hot political issue in terms of access to native forests. So unfortunately, we can't access as much of the native forest resource that we used to be able to. And therefore, pine plantations were put in some time ago because of the recognized future decreases in supply from native forests, but also because plantation pine have a lot of advantages in terms of productivity per land area. So you can get a lot more wood out of a certain unit area of land, can get relatively fast growth rates, and you can get timber that is very appropriate, particularly for framing uses and a variety of other miscellaneous building uses. So pine plantations are a very important source of wood, the most important source of wood in Australia. They can provide a lot of the demand for timber, or the particular specifications in the market for timber can be met by plantation pine, but not everything. So there's still a need for hardwood timbers to provide certain types of timber products, particularly in terms of things like natural durability and particular strength, etc., appearance aspects. There are a variety of reasons, Fanny, why there's been a big switch towards plantation pine in contrast to continued significant use of native forests.
When we talk about climate change and the emission reduction efforts, forests and trees are always brought up as a really good solution to sequester carbon from the atmosphere. Why is timber a really good solution for decarbonizing the building industry? Because then we would the trees, which seems a bit counterintuitive to helping them grow. So how is the timber industry and timbers in building help decarbonization efforts?
Yeah, that's a very good question, Fanny. As you mentioned, it all starts with the trees absorbing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere for the process of photosynthesis. Approximately something like 1,000 kilograms of carbon dioxide is taken out of the atmosphere for every 1 cubic meter of wood. That's just a really rough sort of universal average. Then basically when you harvest that tree and you then convert it into building materials or sawn timber or other wood products, the wood itself then locks up that carbon throughout its service life. Even if the timber does get into landfill, studies have shown that there is a very minimal release of carbon from that wood, even when it's in landfill, for example. So the main thing is that the wood itself stores carbon. Again, a universal sort of average, something like 50% of the dry weight of wood is carbon. The other aspect with using wood products to help decarbonize the building industry is that the manufacturing of wood products actually results in a lot lower carbon emissions compared to the manufacturing of other building materials like concrete and steel and other materials. So it's a very low carbon footprint building material. And it's renewable, so you can replant after you've harvested as well, and the cycle just continues and continues.
Thank you very much for entertaining my questions, and it comes clear that you are very knowledgeable in this topic. Why did you decide to join the DBI network?
We had always had good relationships with the University of Melbourne over many years in other projects. That was one good starting point, that we really like working with University of Melbourne and we got really good relationships with the key people involved. But I suppose more importantly, we recognize that this project was a real opportunity to result in a real impact and to really address the urgent need to do something about climate change and the objective of lowering global carbon emissions. So we were attracted by that. We could see that the project was really well organized, very well set up, had really an impressive list of participants and collaborators, really good objectives. We thought to ourselves, we would like to do more in this space directly relevant to decarbonising the building industry. For a very long time, obviously, we've worked in forestry and wood products research, but we haven't really been pursuing that research so much just for the sole sake of decarbonising the building industry. A lot of our research in the past has been all about better performance of timber products, increasing the market share of wood products, solving technical problems, increasing recovery from forest resources. But by us being involved in this DBI project, we could really see that we had a really critical role to play in this project. And we also thought it would really help us, and I suppose also the DBI project, achieve some long-term objectives.
And we will get back to the opportunities in a second. But first, what do you see as the biggest challenge in decarbonizing the building industry?
For me, some of the biggest challenges are things such as changing traditional paradigms and changing old ways of thinking or traditional mindsets. There's a lot of resistance to change, and we find it with many things in our research where the industry is always reluctant to change from something they've been doing for a very long time to something new. So it takes a long time to convince some of the decision makers that it's time to move into something different. That's one big challenge. I think the other ones are demonstrating the cost effectiveness and economic viability of alternative building materials, proving that it's financially viable and acceptable in terms of the cost structures. I think another one is education and know-how and awareness. I think in the case of getting more wood products into construction, for example, to decarbonize the building industry, one of the biggest barriers is knowledge and teaching people how to use wood products in construction to make them feel confident. And that includes appropriate standards and specifications. I think for me, they're some of the biggest challenges, Fanni, in terms of decarbonizing the building industry.
What do you think is the most significant opportunity in decarbonizing the building industry?
But you probably gather I might be very biased, but for me, I see that it's a no-brainer that wood products represent probably the or one of the biggest opportunities to achieve decarbonisation objectives. So many things are positive about using more wood products in construction. A lot of studies have shown that by using engineered timber in buildings, like for example, 10-story buildings, you can have up to a 90% reduction in the carbon emissions compared to a concrete structure, for example. But there are challenges. So for me, the opportunity is to get more wood products into construction. However, there are still challenges to do that. There's still some of those things I mentioned before, some of those things about traditional thinking and knowledge, etc. But also there are some technical challenges to overcome, like some timbers are very hard to glue to make engineered wood products, so we need to solve technical challenges. But also there's only a finite forest resource that can supply wood products for building materials. So we need to work out a way to increase our forest resources and also to get more out of our forest resources. There's quite a long discussion there about how to achieve decarbonisation through a focus on wood products. But I think it's a great opportunity.
Can you tell us about any projects you are working on that align with DBI goals?
A lot of the projects in our portfolio are directly aligned with the decarbonisation of the building industry objective. Some of those things I mentioned before about some of those challenges and barriers to greater uptake of wood products, we're working on trying to address those challenges to try and, for example, increase the recovery of wood products from forests so we have more wood products available for the building industry to use, and also trying to address some of the technical challenges that we confront in using wood products in construction. But more specifically in terms of the DBI project, our selection of projects for our involvement in the DBI is based on workshops. So we will have a series of workshops with key industry stakeholders to identify priorities and to choose project areas which are deemed to be the most important in terms of the decarbonisation objective. And so we had our first workshop in September, hosted by the Griffith University team, who did a really good job. And that workshop identified a big list of topics. And from that, we took two of the most important topics, which were timber circular economy. So improving circularity aspects of using wood products, particularly with treated wood. So a lot of wood is actually treated to protect it from decay and from insects, etc., like termites. And then there's an issue of what do you do with that treated wood waste that's generated during manufacturing? And also, what do you do with the treated wood product at the end of its service life? And so the industry saw that as a big priority in terms of how do we use a lot of that treated wood waste to provide engineered wood products to use in construction. That's one big project focus. And also we're looking at another project, which is trying to come up with a more easy to use, accurate carbon calculator, specifically for the Australian industry, and more particularly to cover Australian wood products so that there's accurate information for builders and designers, etc., and architects to use to compare carbon emissions and carbon displacement aspects of different timber products versus other materials. They're our main projects, Fanni, but throughout the course of the project, we'll be doing additional projects based on the outcomes of those workshops that we'll hold every year.
Bill, thank you so much for your time today and also the work you are doing, because it's really important to utilize every aspect we can to decarbonize the building industry. What would you like people to know about the DBI?
Thanks very much, Fanni. Look, I think it's a really wonderful project with really great people. It's a real energy there and really good relationships. We're really picking up really good vibes since we've been involved with the project. It's also a project that can be transformational for society and can really help address these concerns with global carbon emissions and climate change, etc. So I think it's really interesting for people to understand what we're trying to achieve in the DBI project. And I think also more particularly, if certain people have suggestions or ideas that they want to share on particular project areas, we'd really love to receive that feedback, and don't hesitate at all in contacting us to discuss certain project areas. Thanks for that, Fanni.
Thank you very much, Bill. Thank you for tuning into this episode of the Decarbonizing the Building Industry podcast. We hope you found today's conversation with Bill Leggate insightful and inspiring as we work together toward a more sustainable future. If you're passionate about transforming the building industry and want to stay connected with the latest developments, we invite you to join the DBI network on LinkedIn. You can also visit our website, where we regularly share updates on upcoming events, project progress, and the innovative solutions driving our mission forward. Let's continue the conversation and build a greener tomorrow together.